Today we shall deal about the Roman Pontiff. The Roman Pontiff. The canons are from 331 to 335. 331 to 335. Along with the notes, are you going through the canons? Are you reading the canons? If you read, you will understand the things properly. In the code, the preferred title for the Pope is Roman Pontiff. That is the title we see in the code. Roman Pontiff or Pontiff. Roman Pontiff. What does it mean by Pontiff? It comes from the word pons. It comes from the word pons. Pons means bridge. Facere, to make. Pons means bridge and facere means to make. So it meant one who bridged the chasm between the gods and humankind. One who bridged the chasm, chasm. There's a gulf or little break. So that is joined or bridged between the gods and humankind. So Pontiff means the one who bridges the chasm between the gods and humankind. So this is the ancient term used for the priest in the Roman Empire. Normally or generally in the ancient time, this term is used for the priest in the Roman Empire. The Pontifex Maximum Pontifex Maximum was the high priest in pagan Rome. Pontifex Maximum was the high priest in pagan Rome. Later on, the title was applied to bishops in the early church. This title was applied to bishops in the early church, and gradually it was used or it was reserved to the bishop of Rome. First to the priests, later on to the bishops in general, and afterwards this was reserved to the bishop of Rome. So Pope is the Bishop of Rome. The other canonical titles for the Pope is Supreme Pontiff. That also we will come across. Summus Pontifex, Supreme Pontiff. The name most commonly used is Pope, right? That everyone is aware. Commonly used term is Pope. It comes from the Greek word papas, which means father. And is the source for the more formal title Holy Father. And if you want a Latin term, Papa. Accent on first A, Papa. In Italian, father means Papa. Same spelling, P-A-P-A. But accent on Papa for father, Italian. So this is how the word derived from the ancient time onwards. Roman Pontiff, Supreme Pontiff, Holy Father, right? All these are the titles for Pope. The Pope is first and foremost and always the head of the College of Bishops that we know. He is the head of the College of Bishops, which he presided over and governs his ministry. He is the vicar of Christ. He is the vicar of Christ, whom he represents, from whom alone his ministry derives. He represents Christ and from whom his power derives. He is the pastor of the universal church. Since he is the pastor of the universal church, he is also head of all the faithful and of all other pastors. The successor of Peter is charged. Who is the successor of Peter? Is the Pope. He is charged to nourish, support, encourage, and unify his fellow faithful Christians as a responsibility. He is charged to nourish, support, encourage, and unify his fellow faithful Christians. Jesus ordered Peter to feed his flock, right? Jesus ordered Peter to feed his flock and strengthen his disciples. John 21, 15 to 17. Luke 22, 32. Chapter 22, verse 32. So Jesus ordered Peter to feed his flock and strengthen his disciples. The canons of the code say little of these central pastoral responsibilities. So, canon law doesn't speak much about the pastoral responsibilities of the Pope, but instead it speaks of the juridical power, not pastoral power, but the juridical power and juridical responsibilities. Now let us see what are his powers according to Canon 331. Canon. The office uniquely committed by the Lord to Peter, the first of the apostles, and to be transmitted to his successors, abides in the bishop of the Church of Rome. So he is the bishop of the Church of Rome, Bishop of Rome. He is the head of the College of Bishops, the vicar of Christ, the pastor of the universal church here on earth. Consequently, by virtue of his office, he has supreme, full, immediate, and universal ordinary power in the church. So these are the powers, okay? Supreme, full, immediate, and universal ordinary power in the church. And he can always freely exercise his power. And little explanation about these ordinary, supreme, full, immediate, universal powers. Ordinary and universal, what does it mean? Ordinary and universal. It is exercised directly in virtue of his office and not by commission or mandate of another. So it is exercised directly, not with the order of another person, because it is directly derived from Jesus Christ. In virtue of his office, directly exercises, not by commission or mandate of another. The Pope, even though he is elected by cardinals, is not the representative or delegate of the conclave. Though he is elected by the cardinals, but he is not the representative or delegate of the conclave. What is the meaning of conclave? Yeah, it's a group of cardinals who vote for the election of the Pope. Group of cardinals voting to elect the Pope. So therefore his election is not conditioned. Okay, so his power is not limited. It is not conditioned by anyone, though the cardinals elect him. Till the election only. Once he is elected, it's ordinary and proper power. And next is supreme. It means not subject to any other. Not subject to any other. His decisions are not liable to objection. There is neither appeal nor recourse against a decision or decree of Roman Pontiff. That is the supreme power. No one can appeal or recourse against the decision or decree of the Roman Pontiff. Canon 333, paragraph 3. Next, full. It is not limited to certain matters. His power is not limited to certain matters, places, or persons. Nor is it to be exercised in accordance with and under the guidance of any other. It is not exercised under the guidance of any other person. When we say his power is full, is not limited to certain matters, places, persons, or under the guidance of any other. Immediate, next. Immediate. It is received directly from God. Immediate means it is received directly from God and exercised directly over each and every member of the faithful and every community. Received directly from God and exercised directly over each and every member of the faithful and community in the entire universal church. Next, universal. Universal. It covers all matters having to do with the life and mission of the church. All matters of the life and mission of the church. For example, doctrine, liturgy, pastoral care, government, etc. So, all matters of the church. And also, on the other hand, the Pope, by virtue of his office, not only has the power in the universal church, but also possesses a primacy of the ordinary power over all particular churches. By virtue of his office, not only has the power in the universal church, but also he possesses a primacy of the power, ordinary power, over all particular churches. So we have the universal church and the particular churches. So that also we will see afterwards. Over all particular churches and groupings of churches. So equal to the particular church, there are also other churches, we will see. Canon 333, paragraph 1. The Supreme Pontiff can always freely exercise his power, we have seen, without limits of time, interruption, and other conditions. So we said his power is not conditioned, there is no limit. With all his freedom, he exercises his power. But he is subject to what Christ the founder has established for his church. Is it clear? So earthly, in the universal church, he is not subjected to anyone, but he is subjected to Christ the founder. He only founded the church. And whatever Christ established for his church, that is called divine law. He cannot go against the divine law. he cannot change and modify the divine law. So the code of canon law is of divine law and ecclesiastical law. We dealt about that. So divine law even the Pope cannot change, was directly given by the founder Jesus Christ, okay, that he cannot change, cannot touch. But ecclesiastical laws can be changed or modified. So his ministry is in the service of the unity of the entire church. So he has to unite the entire church. And in the church there are also the bishops. The bishops preside in God's stead over the flock of which they are the shepherds with proper power. So as Pope is having the universal proper power, the bishops also enjoy the or have the power, proper power in the particular church whose care is entrusted to particular bishop. Lumen Gentium number 20. So we said the Pope enjoys the supreme power, right? He exercises supreme power and ministry. The specific modes of exercising the supreme ministry have varied depending on the circumstances of place and time. So according to the circumstances and place, it changes, varies. In what sense? In relation to the Eastern Catholic churches, the Pope exercises power differently than in relation to the Latin churches. So exercises the power but differently, not same as in the Latin church comparing to the Eastern church, Catholic churches. The rules for the election of the Pope have been laid down in the Apostolic Constitution Universi Dominici Gregis. Universi Dominici Gregis. The rules and election of the Pope. Last time I mentioned, right? So Code of Canon Law doesn't speak about the election and rules for the election. All the details are there in this book, Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis, promulgated by Pope John Paul II, now Saint John Paul II, on February 22, 1996. So in it, the procedure of the conclave is regulated in detail, as well as the different types of election that are possible. Normally, he who obtains the least 2/3 of the votes plus one is elected. The same Apostolic Constitution determines the tasks of the College of Cardinals while the Roman See is vacant. When the Roman See is vacant, and what is the responsibility and work of the cardinals is mentioned there. So Canon 335. So this is by way of some information for you. The election must be accepted by the person elected. If one of the persons is elected, he should accept it. But it requires no confirmation on the part of anyone. With the acceptance, he comes to the power, and it need not be confirmed by another person, because he is the supreme pontiff and there is no other person above him in the hierarchy. So these are already dealt previously in last lesson when we discussed about the elections and all. So the election must be accepted by the person elected, but it requires no confirmation on the part of anyone. However, since the power that the supreme pontiff must exercise requires episcopal character, so according to the power he enjoys, the episcopal obligations are there. Therefore, he must be a bishop. At the time of election, if he is not a bishop, first he should be consecrated as a bishop after the election, and after the consecration only he exercises his power, because the Pope, this office demands the episcopal requirement. Since the power that the supreme pontiff must exercise requires episcopal character, if the person who is elected is not already a bishop, he must be consecrated immediately after his acceptance. Okay, immediately he should be consecrated as the bishop, and only then does he receive the power of the primacy. Is it clear? If any priest is elected, he should be immediately consecrated as the bishop. After the consecration as the bishop, then only he enjoys the power, the primacy power of the primacy. He receives the power of the primacy. Likewise, the resignation of the Pope from his office requires no acceptance. Coming to power, once he accepts, no confirmation is required. And when he wants to resign, so no acceptance is required. If he resigns, that's all. But no one has the authority to accept it. And if I resign from the obligations of the parish as a pastor, then it should be accepted by the bishop. But when Pope resigns from his obligations, so no acceptance is required. And if a bishop wants to resign, it should be accepted by the Holy See. The Roman Pontiff exercises his ministry in a continuous way. Is a continuous, making use in various ways of the assistance and cooperation of the bishops. First of all, his ministry is continuous by making use of the assistance and cooperation of the bishops and of other organisms and persons such as the synod of bishops, the cardinals, the Roman Curia, or pontifical legates. So with the help of all these, the Pope exercises his office, his ministry. So ministry is continuous, and he gets the cooperation and assistance of the bishops, other organisms or dicasteries, different congregations are there, because we will see something of those, and persons such as the Synod of Bishops, the Cardinals, Roman Curia, Pontifical Legate, etc. So about them we will see later. Okay, we don't anticipate them. And there are rights and prerogatives of the Pope. Prerogative of the Pope. He possesses infallible teaching authority. Important. Possesses infallible teaching authority, is a supreme pastor and teacher of all the faithful. Infallible, what does it mean? So is not capable of making mistake. So infallible teaching. Canon 749. The Pope, he is the supreme judge for the whole Catholic world. He is the supreme judge. Canon 1442. Any case may be appealed to him at any time. Any case. Either in the diocesan tribunal or in the universal tribunals. There are two: Segnatura Apostolica, Rota Romana, and final appeal can be made to the Pope. 1417 paragraph 1. Pope is the supreme administrator and steward of all the church's temporal goods. He is the supreme administrator and steward of all the church's temporal goods. So all these temporal goods, all the assets, the temporal goods belong to the universal church. We administer locally, but finally all these are of the universal church, and all the temporal goods of the universal church is administered by the Pope. He has authority to intervene. So when we study the temporal goods, we cannot sell off 10 acres of land. Simply early morning we get up and make the decision sell off. No, we cannot do that. So certain rules and regulations are there, and with the permission only. To a certain amount we have to get the permission of the bishop, and it exceeds, we have to approach the Holy See to sell it off. Alienation of the temporal goods. So he is the administrator and steward of all the church's temporal goods. Canon 1273. He has the right to send legates to particular churches and to sovereign nations. He has the right to send legates to particular churches and to sovereign nations. Canon 362. He receives the obedience of all clerics. Receives the obedience of all clerics. Canon 273. And religious. All clerics and religious. For religious, Canon 590, paragraph 2. Pope convokes and controls ecumenical councils. He convokes and controls the ecumenical councils. Canon 338. He appoints or confirms all bishops. Appoints or confirms all bishops. Canon 377, paragraph 1. Hence controls the membership of the College of Bishops. Hence controls the membership of the College of Bishops. He receives a report on the state of each diocese. Receives a report on the state of each diocese from the bishop every 5 years. Canon 399, paragraph 1. So during the ad limina visit, the bishop of particular diocese should present the report and the condition of the diocese to the bishop, Pope. He can limit the authority of bishops. He can limit the authority of bishops by reserving certain matters to himself. Canon 381, paragraph 1. Reserves to himself dispensations from clerical celibacy. Reserves to himself dispensations from clerical celibacy. Canon 291. And from non-consummated marriages. Non-consummated marriages. Canon 1142. He can give permission to religious institutes from the authority of local bishops. He can exempt religious institutes from the authority of local bishops. On certain matters, Pope gives permission or freedom from the authority of the local bishop. They can exercise. Canon 591.